Hello everybody, we're back on that CJ5 body tub restoration again today. And what I've done since last time is grind all the flanged areas and areas that were covered by the floor that were rusty. Ground those down to clean metal. Put some weld through primer on there. You've seen me use that before. And I cut the floor. I finished cutting that to the correct size, and then I went around and cleaned up all the edges where it was plasma cut. When you make a plasma cut, don't just leave the raw edge and think you're going to successfully weld through it. Take a little wheel or something, go around the edge there and clean that up. You want a nice clean surface there. Let me see if I can come around here and show you. Okay, don't make the floor installation any harder than it has to be. So take this edge and just clean that very well. I use a little air sander, air grinder, or whatever you want to call it, like that. Just with some 50 grit wheel on it, and that works real good. It just buzzes along pretty fast, and that makes short work of cleaning up any of the junk that's left from the plasma cut, and give yourself just a little bit extra on the painted area, and your MIG welds will go in there perfectly. So I've got one little area I need to address right there, but I had to get the floor fit first so I could take that hole, and once I cut that out, I'll know exactly where the body mount hole goes again. So on something like this, when 90% of that rear floor riser is intact and stuff, it doesn't make sense to separate the body. You do more harm than good when you got a decent body like this. So what I'm going to do is cut that out. There's another piece behind it, like a double reinforcement, because that's a body mount, and I'll put that in there. And I believe it's the same on the other side, but no sense in completely drilling out all the spot welds and messing up the floor and the side panels, separating the body, and get a chance for misalignment. It's in very good shape except for these areas right here. So I'm going to cut those areas out, patch them in, and then the floor will go in and we'll tack it in, and I'll show you how that goes as it happens. Okay, stick with me. I'll be right back with you. Okay, here's our patch panel all made. You could see on the original, the only reason that rotted out was because they had a doubled up piece of metal there, and the rear tire kicks up a bunch of stuff right up against the rear floor riser, and it gets in between there, and you can see the results. So this is the mount right where the frame starts to kick up a little bit, so that's why we've got this bent to the angle of the frame. And what I have on here is some of that weldable primer again. And I've got some holes in here. We're going to plug weld this piece to that. I've got a good coating of weldable primer on both of them. And we'll plug weld through there. And that'll give it at least a little bit of a fighting chance, because, you know, there'll be primer between the metal and it won't rust so fast. You could also take a very thin bead of seam sealer, run it down each side, leave the bottom open, and run a little bit across there, and that will also keep the water out. Biggest thing is you need to keep the water out, and this is an area where the tire just throws water and mud and grit and stuff right against this, and you can see what happens. Like I say, this Jeep came from Utah, and a little better conditions out there than there is here on the East Coast, and it's still rotted out. It's a very common area for CJ5s to rust out, and like I say, they just took two pieces of metal, slapped them together, spot welded them together, and that's the result. So give it a little bit of a fighting chance, and put some weldable primer behind there, and that will extend the life quite a bit. So I'm going to plug weld those now, and then start fitting it into the body, and I'll meet you back over there in just a little bit. Okay, we've got our patch in the rear floor riser, and it's a piece of 14 gauge. The floor risers are originally made out of 14 gauge, so use the same material to patch it. And then I put that double piece on the inside, and I got everything welded in, and I got everything ground down so we can put the floor in. And that's going to be inside the toolbox, but you still want to treat it like a regular patch. Full penetration weld, grind it smooth, and now we're going to fit the floor. And because we fit the floor perfectly, we'll take the hole in the floor, put it on that patch we put in, and bore a hole through both pieces for the frame bolt. So I'll get that fit in here and get the hole laid out. We'll cut the hole and we'll begin tacking that patch panel in. Okay, I've got the floor panel in there now, and that's where we're going to have to drill our hole through for the frame mount. And when you put your panel in, I'm going to try and get you in here close. You want a very nice gap here. You don't want big spaces that you're filling in with wire. You want a nice gap all the way around. And spend some time on that, because that's going to make the difference between a nice install and something that you got to do a lot of extra welding and grinding on. And we're going to weld that. We're going to set the welder fairly hot, and we've got that little bit of gap. So we're going to weld it from the back side, and we'll get 100% penetration for when we grind it. And then we'll go on the inside and just dust off the reinforcement we have there with a little grinder, and that floor will be installed. Now when you're putting this floor in, you see that this indentation that they made in the floor, that's supposed to be what goes over the rear floor riser. That's completely way too large, and it's not angled. It's supposed to angle down because the frame comes up on an angle. See, this is just flat, so it's not going to fit the frame. So this all has to be hammered down. This whole thing is going to have to basically be reworked. But there's not much we can do with it until we start welding it in. It's just going to be a bunch of welding and hammering, because it's completely the wrong kind of stamped hole in there. So a little bit of a pain right there, but we'll get most of the floor tacked in before I start fiddling with that, and we'll drill the hole after it's sitting down where it should be, and that's going to be a floor panel installation. But I'll show you bits and pieces of it as we start getting it tacked in there. I still got to flip it over, put some weldable primer on there, and that's it. That's the final fit. I'm happy the way everything is fitting. So a little bit of weldable primer on this lap seam back here, and we'll let that dry and get to welding. Okay, all the weldable primer is dry. I've got the panel fit into the body, and I'm just starting to tack it in now. And I'm coming across the top here, and then we're going to be very careful about lining the panels up perfectly flush. And we're just going to stitch it in just a little bit at a time. I'm not worried about fully welding anything now. We're just worried about tacking it in. Don't be afraid to weld hot. You want your penetration to be right through there, because we're going to grind everything flush. And if we don't have full penetration, the panel is just going to come apart. So don't be afraid to turn your welder up and make some nice hot tacks. You got to do a little prying around to get things to fit right. Do what you have to do to get those flush. You don't want any lap seams or anything. You don't want anything not flush. So that little chisel comes in handy, and we're just going to keep working down here and keep tacking it in. You can see it's coming nice, everything's nice and flush. In the back here I've got some holes, we're going to plug weld all that. And I'm just going to keep going around here and put a whole bunch of tacks so nothing moves around. And then we're going to weld this just a little bit at a time. We'll do a small section over here, then we'll come over here and do a small section over here. We're going to jump all around this, and because there's so much work to do on this tub, I'm not even worried if I don't get it all welded in today. You know, every day we'll come out here, we'll cut that other panel out, we'll put some, we'll weld this a little bit, do some more work, and then come back and weld it. We want to keep this panel cool. We don't want any distortion. It's not a real big deal here if we take our time and weld it just little sections at a time. So there'll be a nice flat panel when we're done, and we won't have too much I guess you'd call it banging out the shrunk areas, you know, because every time we tack one of these, this area shrinks. So we're going to come in here later and we're going to dress all these welds with a hammer. And if you go real slow, you don't have too much dressing to do. It won't shrink up real bad on you. And like I say, just take your time. Don't make it where you got to be in a hurry or anything. Make sure you have enough time to just carefully stitch this in a little bit at a time, and it'll come out perfect. And I'll show you along the way as it's going what it looks like, and I'll show you how nice and flat it comes out. Okay, I'm still moving along on the floor. Right now I am plug welding through the back of the floor into the rear floor riser. And that has the weldable primer on it, and sometimes it's a bear to weld through, but it's worth the protection, so do what you have to do to get the welds in there. And I keep a tub of nozzle dip with me, and you just, when the nozzle's hot, you just put it in that kind of jelly right there, and it keeps the nozzle clean. And like I say, it's going to be spitting and jumping and stuff, and it's kind of a pain. It's not the best welding conditions, but like I say, it's absolutely worth it. So we'll put a few of these in and see how it goes. Not terrible. And then when the nozzle's hot, dunk it right in there, and that will keep your nozzle nice and clean. It won't collect a lot of junk in there from when the weld is spinning. You can get a container like that for not too much money. It's absolutely worth it when you're plug welding through weldable primer. Like I say, it's going to spit and jump on you, but you just have to deal with it. And we'll get these finished welded in here. We'll dress these after. It's staying nice and flat for us, so that's good. The hat channel will go on there nice when we go to put that in. Like I say, we're just going to keep plugging along here. Weld a little bit down here, weld a little bit up there, and just keep jumping around until that whole floor is welded in. Okay, I've got a fair amount of tack welds in here now, about every inch or so. That's how I like to make sure I got the panel in there good. Got to do a little fussing where that curved hat channel is there. And I think you can see what I had to do to that big that big bump they had in there. They hit that with some tooling and pressed it in there, but naturally it wasn't correct. It has to go on an angle. They just had a I had about 3/8 gap there because their stamping just came up and over, and that doesn't work. There's a lot of material in there you got to smash down if you want to get it to fit right. So I got that in the right place. I got all our plug welds done, and I'll try and show you what the hat channel is going to look like. Now I don't know exactly where the hat channel has to be on here, so before I position the hat channel, I'll take our template and put it on the inside, and I will pop through the sheet metal with the right size hole, and then I can line up the hat channel to that hole. Again, that's why that pattern was so important. So let me get the camera set up, and we'll take a look and see how that floor looks with the hat channel on it. Okay, there's the floor with all the tacks in it. Now we're going to position this piece of hat channel on there. I'm not exactly sure where it goes right now. Like I say, once we have a hole in the sheet metal, we can line this back piece up. Not sure where that goes just yet. When this comes up here, I think that's going to be fine. Just get a clamp on that. Okay, looks like the floor is nice and flat. We might have to pop it up a little bit when we go to weld it, but it's in very nice shape as it sits right now. And once I figure out where this goes, we'll pop a bunch of holes in the hat channel, we'll plug weld it like we did there, because we want to get the inside of this coated with that weldable primer, and we want to get the floor coated with that. Everywhere where the two panels are going together, we're going to coat everything, and it's coming together pretty nice. Like I say, I'll tack weld this, a little bit here and there. I have to patch this front toe board a little bit. We'll get that patched. Then I'm going to move on to the driver's side and show you guys how to turn a floor into the correct floor. And every now and again we'll come over here, we'll put a few more welds in here, and little by little we'll get it completely welded in. But we're in good shape now. The hat channel is fitting kind of okay. We might have to take this front piece off, get the weld out of there and position that, because it doesn't look like it's going in the right place. But for the most part, our floor is nice and flat. This is going to sit down real nice. We'll get a hole in there where the back mount goes, and everything's looking pretty good. So I will break this side down, reset up the camera, and tomorrow we'll get working on that driver's side floor. And I'll show you the steps involved in that. Okay, that's all I got for you for today. Passenger floor is basically in, and I'll catch you on the next video. I appreciate you watching, and if there's anything you'd like to see, like I always say, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to continue on with this CJ5 body restoration, and hope you're enjoying it, and we'll see you tomorrow.